We're here today with Michael F. Lewis, author of Social Media Leadership: How to Get Off the Bench and Into the Game. Also with us are Steve Ennen, President and Chief Intelligence Officer of Social Strategy One, and Wharton Marketing Professor Eric Bradlow. So Mike, in the beginning of your book, you tell an interesting story about how you realized the importance of social media and sort of your journey from the pew to the pulpit, as it were. Could you kind of share that story with our audience?
Sure. We were, in part of our legacy business at ILD, sort of caught off guard by just how much misinformation there was on the internet and just some frustration among end users because of that poor information. So we took a very proactive approach, learned a lot about how to listen and monitor what was going on, how to deal with that directly. I got our team together and made sure that we were all aware that we wanted to be as proactive as possible, to know that we were trying to reach out to people, that they could reach out to us. And that was a very valuable lesson, and one that I think we turned some scars into stars as a result of that. But concurrent with that, I was actually here at a Wharton development function and really got presented in a great way the development and evolution that was taking place in social media and how mainstream it was becoming. And as a result of that, we've launched a couple of businesses. We've launched OfficeArrow.com, which is a community of small business owners, office professionals. It's now 4 years old and grown to about 350,000 members. And we started a separate Social Strategy One division, and now soon to be a separate company from our base of legacy businesses, and that's where we are engaging with corporations, helping them develop social strategy plans based on what their current status is in terms of engagement on the internet and what they want to do to grow their business. And we're now even moving into a small business version of that. So it's been quite an active 4 years as a result of what we experienced on our own and what I was exposed to here.
Great. Now, Eric, I understand that you actually suggested that Mike write this book. Could you talk to us a little bit about how typical is his experience among CEOs? I mean, are CEOs realizing the strategic significance of their companies having a social media strategy, and how are they reacting to that?
Yeah, I think there's really two parts to it. I think the first part is most people misinterpret what social media is about. They use it as a talking vehicle. Social media is a listening vehicle. It's both, but most people don't understand that the real power is to be able to listen to the customer in a real-time and effective way. And I think Mike is unique in the following sense. You know, everyone says, well, of course there are tools out there for everyone to do social media listening. Actually, there really aren't. There are if you're a big business. You can hire a Bazaar Voice or someone else to build a platform for you. But what do you do if you're a restaurant owner, if you have 2 or 3 different, let's say outlets for your company? Then there really aren't the tools necessary. So I think the space that Mike's been working in, I think the space that his book answers, is the next great frontier, which is really social media listening and social media for small businesses and entrepreneurs. And they know they need to get in the game, but to be honest with you, they don't know how. And it's only through that practical experience that Mike's book brings that we'll be able to do that. And so the reason it's also near and dear to my heart is I spent 6 years here at Wharton working with the Wharton Small Business Development Center, and small businesses say this over and over again. They want to listen to their customers. They don't know how to do it, and they don't know what to do as a result of the data they're getting back. So I think Mike's book and his experience is extremely unique in that way, and will be valuable for a lot of different businesses.
Mm-hmm. Now, Steve, to follow up on that a little bit, I mean, the social media landscape is evolving, I would even say almost daily, it seems like. I mean, for example, Facebook had some 200 million users in 2009, and this year now they're at more than 650 million. And obviously it's more than just Facebook. I mean, there's Groupon, there's Foursquare, there's Twitter, and there's really a bunch of other sites that have now been adding this social media aspect. I mean, how would you say that the social media landscape has evolved? I mean, can you kind of talk about that, especially in business terms?
Well, you're absolutely right about the scope and scale of that, and it's sort of mind-blowing when you think about that on a global level. But there are also thousands of companies that never hit the newspapers or the media fronts that are affecting businesses in different ways too, and they're connecting each other together. They're allowing greater collaboration. They're allowing and developing new business models, and they're allowing a lot of and fostering a lot of creativity. And that creativity is going to affect traditional business models. So when we think about social media, we have to think about it in its entirety, and we have to think about the fact there are players there that feed off of Facebook, certainly, but go in many, many different directions. All of them, in some way, will affect every business on the planet in the very, very near future. And I think that's a warning flag we should all be cognizant of, especially at the leadership level, and that's what Mike's book does so well, is that, here are the ways it can affect you. Here are the ways that you can prepare to be effective in using social media and understanding social media. The first step is obviously listening, knowing what that landscape is like, and knowing how you play or your business plays in that landscape. I think, Rachel, to bring it down to a nutshell, it's thousands and thousands of channels, thousands and thousands of new entrants that create fragmentation, creativity, and collaboration on a scale we've never before imagined.
Which I would think is both scary and lots of opportunity there.
It's scary. It's scary if you're not aware of it, just like anything else. If you understand, because it's not a black box necessarily. It's just a fast-moving target. So if you can demystify social media, especially at the leadership level, and you can take that through organizational structure and prepare your organization around that, then you can leverage the benefits that it brings, and you don't have to be afraid of it. It's constantly moving, and that's a challenge that businesses face now because they're not set up to be agile. I mean, look at major corporations. Social Strategy One works with some global corporations, and they're just not built to take advantage of the changes at the rate they come. But you can be. And to Eric's point a little bit earlier, by listening, you have a great sense of where things are coming around the road, so you're not surprised by the next turn.
Actually, Steve said something that I just want to follow up on, which I think is crucially important, is that it's why Mike's book is unique. It has to come from a CEO. See, here's why. Because what a lot of companies are doing is they're doing a lot of listening, but their social media strategy is siloed into one aspect of their business. And so what you really need is the CEO perspective, because it has to be culturally, as Steve mentioned, it's not just that every business is affected, but every part of your business is affected. And so listening is wonderful. That's what I frame as one of those nice-to-know things. But you can spend a lot of money and make no money on nice-to-know things. It's integrating social media into your business, and that's why having someone that's a social media expert write a book, those are great. But having a CEO write a book about social media and about the organizational structure and the impact, totally different perspective and one that's really not out there.
And actually, to bring it back to you, Mike, I mean, could you tell me, among the various social media platforms, which ones do you think are the most useful for CEOs and why?
Well, I think on an individual basis, LinkedIn would be my preference in terms of just a tool for CEOs to use as sort of their own tool. I think they've done some great things with the platform. I'm certainly active on there, and it's a great way to keep your colleagues and associates posted as to things that you're doing and see what they're doing kind of on a real-time basis. But you can't ignore Twitter and Facebook. I mean, the impact that these platforms have and will have are just immense. And the depth of information that you can get on these platforms is really amazing. The kinds of promotion and awareness creation that you can do with them are very, very strong. And again, I think back to the point that we were just talking about, from a CEO perspective, we all were sort of at the point, at least I was a few years ago, well, what about Facebook? This is just something that my kids do. And in fact, when I did get on Facebook a few years ago, my kids were like, what are you doing here? This is sort of our thing. But it's certainly changed, and what they're offering in terms of ways to advertise and promote your business and create awareness of your brand is just something you have to look at, both with Facebook, Twitter, and then LinkedIn as well. They're going to be the three places you need to be involved with and know all the aspects of how you can use them to grow your business and improve your brand awareness.
Now, I guess that brings me to my next question. Eric, could you talk to us a little bit about, how do social media, a little more about how social media transforms the way that companies can engage with their customers? Could you give us some examples of companies that have made effective use in managing relationships with customers?
I think the best example I can really give is with customer service. I think what social media has allowed companies to do is to listen to customers in real time. If you think about the biggest problem companies have, what is it? It's customer defection and churn. It's the biggest problem companies have. You know why? Because you spend a huge amount of money on acquisition costs, and many customers don't stay around long enough. And so the opportunity for social media listening is, in today's environment, I think as Mike talked about earlier, is you give people a platform to speak. Well, you better listen then. So if you give them a platform to speak, what's important is they're expecting, and here's the challenge for businesses as well, they're expecting faster response than in previous days. You know, when my mother had a problem with a company, she would write a letter, let's say to Sears, and hope that somebody in the customer service division would get back to her in her lifetime. Well, those days are gone. The minute someone posts something, they expect someone to be there to read that something, and they expect a response. So to me, I think the biggest impact of social media is the opportunity to address problems, as Steve mentioned, in real time, and therefore to lessen customer churn. Because that's really, at the end of the day, you don't make any money when someone comes to your business the first time. You make money when they come back over and over again, and social media has the ability to stem churn.
If I could jump in on that too, because we know now, you look at Anthony Weiner and other cases, one tweet can end up on the New York Times. So a lot of those customer service issues can be far-reaching if they surface out of a singular tweet or a singular post on a blog or something like that. That's why the listening becomes so important, and taking that an overall customer service perspective, you can actually look and trend and understand if there are problems surfacing. Maybe it's a regional situation, maybe it's something inside the organizational structure, again, we talk about. but that singular tweet can also give you indications on where things are going, or that post on the blog, and that's why it becomes so important to connect with the customers and hear the voice of the customer.
Well, one other quick thing there, because I think Eric brings up a really important aspect of social media, that customer service is where you really are on the front lines and seeing directly what people are saying about you now, nearly in real time. So what a lot of CEOs need to remember is these conversations are going on with or without you. And my view is you need to be having that dialogue with customers where they are meeting and aggregating and discussing your company or your brand, or else you're just totally missing the boat.
Now, I mean, to get back to what Steve was saying about this idea of like one tweet can end up in the New York Times, I mean, how is it for, Mike, for a CEO? I mean, when you know you've got people tweeting with for the organization on behalf of your organization, I mean, you give up a certain amount, I mean, there's a certain amount of chance there that you never know when one tweet could end up in the New York Times for either very good or very bad or positive or negative reasons. I mean, how do you deal with kind of that? You've got to give up a little bit of control. You've got to kind of let the company's personality shine through, and that's both a great and potentially stress-causing thing.
Well, you're right, and it's something where policy, internal corporate policy, can only take you so far in terms of, giving guidance on how employees, message either on their work time or their personal time. So it is happening, and I think the best way to deal with that is just to have a constant listening program so you're aware of anything that could be harmful, anything that a customer says that could be harmful, because again, remember, in this world, one tweet could impact any number of people, even into the millions, in terms of certain things that get out, get viral, and so you want to be responsive and playing along. And as I said before, the big thing is this is going to happen with or without you. Make it happen with you.
Mike talks in Chapter 10, I think it is, about corporate governance, using social media for corporate governance and compliance. And Social Strategy 1 does that for many of our clients too. We monitor, not as Big Brother does, but we help them police the policies. We help them get indications, or if there are any malcontents within the organization or any of those issues that might surface that could hit the mainstream media or affect the brand. So there's an element of brand reputation tied to the democratization that the employees have, because they can go on social media. But then again, it rolls into a leadership aspect, because now you have to be aware, if you've got 10,000 employees, 10,000 additional voices, the potential impact on your brand. It goes back to listening, but it also goes back to policy, it goes back to corporate governance and compliance. And that's why social media, again, is a C-suite decision. It's not something that's relegated to the marketing department or an intern or even the sales department. It's got to be an organizational aspect.
So now, I mean, Eric, I mean, do you think you could talk a little bit about, I mean, what can companies do to do a better job of managing their reputation through social media? I mean, what are some specific sort of proactive and reactive steps that companies can take to kind of manage this whole thing? I mean, particularly with the idea that Steve just pointed to with, I mean, you could have, every employee in the company is theoretically tweeting from the C-suite on down.
Well, I think there's two aspects, and the first one follows up from what Steve just said. I think a unique opportunity that's out there, which a lot of companies are not doing, is actually listening to their employees. A lot of people say they have to listen to their customers, but what about listening to your employees? I think one of the things that's a burgeoning area of research, which is totally under-researched, is the impact of employee satisfaction on corporate profitability. People have studied for years customer satisfaction. You hear University of Michigan has a customer satisfaction index. Well, how about an employee satisfaction index? As a matter of fact, I would think social media would be a wonderful way to listen to one's own employees and to actually track that. In terms of opportunities for the company, I think at the end of the day, it really is, and this is something I know Steve has spoken a lot about in talks that we've given together, it's really the real-time aspect of things. People really have expectations for immediate response today, and I think, as Mike pointed out, the minute you're not listening, you have no opportunity for real-time response. And again, the minute you construct a real-time platform, people are going to expect real-time listening. And I think that's the big change that's happening today. But employee satisfaction is a wonderful opportunity to use social media. And as Steve said, it's not Big Brother watching you. It's an opportunity for companies to recognize that their employees really are the front line of their business.
It's great in terms of the financial services industry for M&A and VC action too. If you're investigating a company, investing in a company, acquiring a company, selling a company, how those employees feel about their product, their work environment, their management team, how the management team feels about the employees and the work product and the group become very, very important data points in that exchange. And social media can be hard, quantifiable data in that particular examination. So yeah, an extension of the opportunity from an internal perspective. You have the opportunity to apply it to different financial services functions, M&A, VC, et cetera.
It's a research tool.
It's a research tool.
Well, but if I could, I think it's also phenomenal opportunities that many companies are now discovering where in business, typically, it's, profitability is usually somewhere around the margins. And as we talk about brands, traditional media is very limiting in terms of time and how much message can be included in print or radio or TV. The beauty of social media is you can get more subtle messaging that talks more in depth about certain things that might be a real strength of your company, whether it might be in your customer service area or other places where you wouldn't necessarily make a traditional media message out of that. So, and back to Eric's point, I think a lot of times your employees can be great in terms of getting that message out because, one of the key rules of social media is that, user-generated content is the most valued. Well, if it's a content provided by your own employees, the message is they believe in what they're doing. I should really, pay attention to their message to me as a potential customer.
Now, to talk a little more about that, Mike, I mean, could you talk to me a little? I mean, if I'm a CEO and I'm trying to devise a social media strategy for my company, I mean, what are some steps for how to go about that? I mean, how do you take all these different pieces? I mean, user-generated content, what the employees are saying, what the customers are saying, trying to get at all these different little niches, but also get at sort of the broader message. I mean, what do you recommend CEOs who are interested in doing this within their organization? I mean, what should they do? How should they start?
Well, I think the best thing, going back to what Eric mentioned, is start listening to your employees. Find out how they participate in social media on their own, solicit their advice and input as to how we could take our business and grow it using all the various tools and platforms and applications that are available in social media. And then I think it has to be, in my opinion, a top-down sort of decision and commitment because it can't be sort of gratuitous. It has to be genuine. It has to be real. And so anything you undertake to manage your brand, listen to what consumers are saying, monitoring all that's going on the internet, be committed to do that. Don't just do a little bit and then give up on it. And then beyond that, take all that information, solicit help and advice from people in your company, outside your company, and say, let me turn some of what I'm learning there into ways that I can now grow my business. We find in listening and monitoring for some of our clients that there are applications that their products are fulfilling within users that they're not even aware of. And it's a business opportunity and a way to expand the applications of their products and services.
Now, Eric, one of the things that's critical to any social media initiative is measurement, which is something that you guys talk about a lot of at the Wharton Consumer Analytics Initiative. Could you help me understand the role of metrics and analytics in the way that companies use social media? What research has Wharton done in this area? And can you talk about, some of the most important lessons of how companies can kind of take all this data that social media is creating and actually harness it and really use it in a productive way?
It's a good question. I think, as you know, 3.5 years ago, we started, as you know, as the Wharton Interactive Media Initiative under Steve's leadership. And I think we've had themed research cycles every year. First year it was on social networks. The year after it was on user-generated content. And I think it starts with what Mike said. First of all, and I think Steve mentioned it earlier, it can be quantified. Let's start with the beginning. Let's start that as the fundamental beginning. There's been great advances in natural language processing today, Social Strategy 1 being one example of a company doing work in that area. You can quantify what people are saying, you can track it, and the key part is, here's the hardest part. It's not listening anymore that's the hardest part, and this is what we do at the Customer Analytics Initiative. The hardest part is tying that and tracking it to actual purchasing, web browsing, etc. It's the linking of social media to actual purchase behavior or the behavior that makes the firm the profits. That's the hardest thing to do today because, number one, tracking people with cookies, not a very effective way to track people. You could say registered users. Well, that's one way to track people. I think what you're going to see, and I've always said this, measurement comes first, profitability comes second. So now we have the ability to measure what people are saying. The next phase, I think the next big phase you're going to see is the linking of social media measurement to individual level behavior and understanding. So imagine, here's an example. Someone says, well, someone says in their customer service, I'm having a problem. Well, do you get back to them immediately? Well, you say, well, of course you do. Well, last time I checked, it's more expensive to get back to somebody immediately than it is a day, 2 days, a week, etc. Well, what empirical evidence can you get that suggests how quickly you should get back to someone? Well, if you tie your social media listening to your response time data, to your actual purchase history data, you can start to empirically answer questions like this. And so I think that's the next wave of what's coming on. And I think when Social Strategy 1 and other companies end up getting linked with the commerce data that firms are doing, then you have a powerful tool where ROI can be measured. How much value am I getting from this social media? Or imagine you run an A/B experiment where half the people you get back to in a day and the other half the people you get back to in a week. You don't need an advanced degree from Wharton if you say, the retention rate was 14% on this group and 11% on this group. That's 3%. Here's how much money that's worth. Here's how much it costs me to get back to people in a day versus a week. That's how you turn measurement into action.
And I would think, that also means that companies can't go into this not having a plan for metrics or not having a plan for how they're going to maybe build communities. Maybe Steve, you could talk a little bit about that. What steps are involved in you have to plan for this up front so you can actually measure it and see what reaction you're going to get. And then in terms of communities, one thing I know any company would say is that we want our social media to build a strong community around our brand, but how do you actually do that? How does that actually happen?
Yeah, and I'll start with the same thing that we've said a couple times, which is listening, but I think that can't be overvalued, really. The idea is that you can set benchmarks through active listening. You can understand where that universe is around the conversation. You can start to quantify different themes and threads and aspects and understand where your community or your customers are at that particular time. Now, social media is very dynamic. It moves often, so you have to continue the process. But you're going to have to set a benchmark somewhere. To Eric's point, measurement comes first. Know where you are. And then from that aspect, you can start to categorize and catalog different aspects of the organization, different aspects of the brand, different aspects of the customer service, however it falls down. And then you're going to understand more about how to effectively reach and engage and communicate with your audience and potential audience, customers and potential customers. Understanding what messages resonate with them, understanding where what drives purchase intent, understanding how customer lifetime value can be sort of reimagined using them as engaged opportunities as well as just the transactional opportunities. So it's going to start out with listening, as a baseline and benchmark for measurement. It's going to come secondly, I think, sort of quantifying and deconstructing the themes and the sentiments around your customer base and your potential customer base. And then you just start to fold that into different roles within the organization.
Now, Mike, I mean, I think one of the things that any company is probably worried about when getting into this is some of the regulatory and compliance issues involved. Could you talk a little bit about sort of what are the principal risks that every CEO should know about and kind of how to deal with that?
Well, that's a big focus, and if we covered anything sort of in the book that was maybe a little more fresh in terms of real discussion, I think it was the chapter that we had on compliance and how social media will create new angles to compliance. For example, on the internal side, there's no one single policy that works for every corporation. Businesses vary by type of business. Certainly in the financial services area, there's a lot of reasons to be far more restrictive in terms of employee engagement on social media than maybe other businesses. So we talk a lot about that. But I think the bottom line is consult with your legal team, consult with your employees practically about what is the right message to send, but also the right thing to do for the company, and just kind of develop a policy. And I think the policy should be revisited on a regular basis because social media is changing so fast. Now, one other thing that I think that we're going to see is that in terms of financial reporting, social media reports could be very valuable. They could actually, be identifying trends that are taking place that might influence the performance of the business. So at some point, I think those things are going to get more intertwined and just become a part of the company's own internal and external financial reporting and audit processes.
Now, Eric, the web is increasingly going mobile. I mean, people are no longer just accessing Facebook or Twitter on their computers. They're now using their smartphones, their iPads, really just about anything at this point. I mean, what is the impact of that on the way that social media evolves in the future? What are the major emerging trends you're seeing from people going mobile and, tweeting when they instead of tweeting about something they bought once they get home, they're tweeting as they're paying at the cash register?
Well, I might say this was a setup question, but thank you for asking that particular question, and there's a reason why. For all of you that want to attend, in February in 2012, 2012 happens to be the year of mobile for the Wharton Customer Analytics Initiative, and we're having an event here in February on the use of mobile, and it's an academic and practitioner conference about that. At the end of the day, it's local hyper-targeting. That's the ability that mobile devices provide, is that you're going to start to see couponing done. You're already starting to see it done at a local level. You're starting to see companies, obviously Foursquare, Gowalla, lots of different companies where it's not just about what you're saying, it's about where you're saying it, when you're saying it. In some sense, think about all the changes on the web in the last 10 years in what's called contextual advertising. It's not just serving you the right ad, it's serving you the right ad under the right context, under the right landing page at the right time. Well, now, it's not just about what Steve Ennin or Mike Lewis or Eric Bradlow was saying, it's when are they saying it, under what context, and under what business situation. And so what you end up getting in all of these industries is first, let's just listen to everything they're saying. And you say, okay, that's great. But then the next step is what Steve said, is how do you build context around that? And when somebody says something and where they are when they say it, is probably an important part of the way all of us speak and think about it. Because if I'm pissed off and I say something, but it's because I'm right at the register. That's very different than if I say something when I'm back home, I've had time to think about it. And the way firms interpret that information is very different. So let me just say, mobile is the friend of people in social media listening. It's not just that the volume is going up, it's that the context goes up.
Now, Steve, to ask you about, because people are doing this more and more, and then obviously companies want to harness what they're doing and sort of give them deals when they want them, where they want them. Where do privacy concerns fit into that? Because there is that sort of concern. I think, you see it every time Facebook comes out with an update. There's that, at least some group of people saying, well, I don't know if I want people to know what I'm doing and what I'm buying every minute of the day. So how do companies deal with that?
Well, I think it's important to put it into context as well, because there have been privacy concerns for hundreds of years. You know, every new technology, every new marketing approach has the potential to encroach on that. Social media is by definition social. I mean, most of the interactions that take place in social media are meant to be seen. What we're talking about is not cracking the code of PII, personally identifiable information, or going in and finding out all your behaviors on your laptop. We're talking about the person who wants to vent at the cash register because they're having a great or not great experience. We're talking about people who, you know, are seeking out products and services you may offer, or they're listening to their friends or communicating with their friends or colleagues or other professionals about important topics. So I really kind of think the privacy concerns are understandable because it's new, and there's always the fear that Big Brother is tracking me. But when what we're talking about in terms of active listening and applying mobility and a lot of the new technologies is the fact that these conversations are created to be heard anyway. And it gives us the ability to hear the voice of the customer at their point of need. It gives us the ability to communicate with the customer when they've already got a relationship with us. We're launching a product for small business, social media toolbox for small businesses out there, because we recognize small businesses don't have the time or wherewithal to understand excuse me, the entire landscape, but they know that they need to reach out to customers in different ways, right? And the customers are telling them, right, here's a coupon for your mobile phone. It's a lot easier than trying to clip it out of the circular. Or, you know, next time you come in, wave your mobile phone or wave your iPad under this thing. You know, we can help you do that. So it's also a matter of keeping up with the times and keeping up with the needs of the customer.
Now, Mike, you devote a chapter of your book called United We Buy to the phenomenon of group buying, which is one way that a lot of small businesses are actually getting in on social media. So do you think companies like Groupon still have the promise that they once had? I mean, which social buying sites do you find the most useful, and why? It seems like they're everywhere nowadays.
Well, if there's been any real major change since we published the book just a short while ago, it's been in this area. First of all, I still think that these companies have promise and they will find their niches, and this is really just a new mode of advertising that are available to large and small businesses. So at some point, the landscape will consolidate. This type of group buying and discounting will still be prominent, but I don't know that it has the major promise that it was showing, say, earlier this year and so forth. But it's still going to be big, and it's still going to be meaningful. The other part of that chapter, we talk a lot about ratings and rankings, and at some point, I think rankings and ratings become real important too. And one other thing, back to what Steve was just saying, as we look at launching our set of tools for the small business, keep in mind small businesses are saying, we understand we need to do this. We don't know quite what we need to do, except, back to Eric's point, I think, we do need to reach our customers, and we need to try to bring in other potential customers. And how do we do that? And fortunately, the things that have been shown to be successful in the group buying world, Groupon in particular, can now be put in a set of tools where small businesses can offer coupons directly to their customers without worry that it's going out in a big way to people who may only come in for the discount once and never return. So that transaction's not advantageous for the small merchant, but also give them the ability to produce coupons, get the group buying activity they want out, but under their control. So I think the influence that the group buying sites have had is going to be with us, and I do think they're going to continue to be a meaningful set of companies, but obviously consolidation is going to take place here pretty rapidly.
Groupon wishes they had taken the $8 billion.
From Google, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know that even just the other day, I noticed that Amazon now is sending me deals when I didn't even know that they had something like that. Now, to go with the small businesses, I mean, the other thing I've noticed is that, I mean, small businesses seem to have, I mean, there seems to be a lot of new opportunities for them with this, because, I mean, I personally follow a lot of small businesses on Twitter now, because that's when they'll say where they're going to be, where they're going to be selling. I was at a farmer's market earlier in the summer where they had small businesses had something that they could attach to like their iPads or iPhones where they could actually swipe credit cards. Can you talk a little bit about, I mean, has this allowed small businesses to kind of, in a way, maybe catch up to some of the things that larger businesses are able to do because they have more resources? Eric, I mean, why don't you speak to that?
Well, I think the answer is yes. Actually, to be honest with you, my best resource is my 14-year-old son is just absolutely amazing at anything he's interested in, he now follows. And so we get deals, coupons. It's great. He's like an information guide to us. And I think here's the challenge, though. The challenge with that is yes, but eventually, how is any small business going to rise above the clutter that's there? So maybe right now, I'm making a number up, 5% of small businesses are doing it. What's going to happen when that number's 30%, 40%, 50%? Then all of a sudden, I'm going to get 50 tweets saying what's going on in my local area, or 50 text announcements about what's going on. And then all of a sudden, I'm back in the big wash of everyone's kind of doing this. So don't forget the fundamental challenge of messaging and advertising was it's still about the right message targeted to the right person at the right time. If you think that your long-run competitive advantage is going to be because we're doing it and someone else is not, that's not what's going to happen. And so those same challenges, fundamental challenges of marketing and advertising, are still going to remain. I think it relates to what Steve said earlier. You've just added another medium to do it, but it's still fundamentally about messages hitting people at the right time.
Now, I'd like to ask you, I mean, in terms of, I mean, there's so many different social media sites out there. In terms of creating a strategy, I mean, is there a point where a company might say, you know, that particular site maybe doesn't fit our goals and we're not going to use it? I mean, or do you have to be everywhere? Or is it okay to say, this doesn't fit our goals, this isn't producing, we're just going to be over here?
Well, first thing I would say to people in a CEO or chief marketing officer role, social media is a little bit like taking a drink of water from a fire hose. I mean, it is all the time. There's new applications and new platforms popping up. Which is good because it's ever advancing our ability to take traditional selling and marketing techniques and push them out more real time, more individualized, and quite frankly, they will have a positive impact if used right on your business. But I think the only real way to do this is going back to something I said earlier. Make sure that you create the impression to your employees that we are going to be proactive in social media. We're going to be proactive in reaching out to customers and trying to acquire new customers. And once you do that and make it part of the culture, something, you know, back to what Eric said, listen to your employees. They will be the ones coming to you with something they've found useful, which, you know, may or may not have hit your radar yet. So again, I don't think there's any really one solution to keeping current on everything that's happening in social media that would be useful to your business. But if you have the whole organization sort of engaged, I think you're more likely to stay current than if you're you know, just doing it at a certain level.
Sure. And now, I guess the last question for each of you. I mean, what is your most important piece of advice for CEOs around the world making the most of social media? And Steve, why don't you start?
We have to be aware of the shiny object, all right? Some of these things pop up and they can divert our attention from larger strategic goals. From the C-suite perspective, you have to be able to see the entire landscape. You have to be able to know what's coming up. You have to be able to know what's going to affect your company next, right, in a real way, so that you can affect organizational change. It does default to listening, understanding the landscape. It does, benchmarking where you are, benchmarking where your company is, benchmarking where your employees are. But you know, as a word of advice going forward, by listening that way, by understanding and hearing where the world is, you're going to be able to discern what shiny object is meaningful or not meaningful versus what sea change or what aspect of trends will affect your business going forward. So it's going to start with listening and start with, to Mike's point, evangelizing throughout the organizational and you know, enabling them to be active in social media and gearing for the fact that the world is changing at a rapid rate right now, and it affects every business, as Eric said, every aspect of the business. That's not easy to reimagine your entire organization in the time frames that social media will affect it. But look, social media can topple governments. It's going to affect your business.
And Eric, I mean, what would be your most important piece of advice?
I think Steve provided me, not the government part, although I agree to that, but I think Steve provided me a perfect lead-in. I would go to each and every employee of my company and ask them to think about the way that social media can affect the way they do their job. Not half the employees, every employee. And I think the minute it comes from the top down, everybody's going to start thinking, you know, you're right, I could do my job a little bit differently or a little bit better if I involve social media in it. And I think that's the way every company should be thinking about it. Everybody should be a participant in social media.
And Mike will give you the last word.
Well, I think the number one thing I would say, back to something Steve touched on, is you can't ignore it. I mean, that is just not an option for any business, large or small. If you're going to grow and be successful, this has to be part of your overall go-to-market strategy. And there's thousands and thousands of tangents and ways to look at it, but number one, you just can't elect not to participate.
Great. Well, thank you all so much. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel.